Alright, good evening everybody. It's your boy Akeen and welcome to today's vlog. The Kansas City Chiefs had the 23rd selection of the 2014 NFL Draft. Now this team made it to the playoffs last season going 11-5, but ended up choking at Indianapolis after blowing a huge lead headed towards the fourth quarter, and in which they lost 45-44 to the Colts, and they're looking to bounce back this upcoming season. Now overall for this team, they had a pretty stellar performance on both sides of the field. Starting with the offensive side, led by new quarterback Alex Smith, 23 touchdown passes to 7 interceptions to go along with 3,313 yards passing last year. He did a well job managing that offense, but still needs ways to improve. Now Jamal Charles, he was fantasy football's player of the year last season, racking up a lot of points, over 1,200 yards rushing, and also led the team in receiving with just under 700 yards and 20 touchdowns altogether. Now they're going to need some help at the receiving core, knowing that their running back was last season's top leading target, and he's a running back over the wide receivers. Now defensively, they did a pretty good job according to fantasy football, and I had them as my defense in fantasy football, and they bailed me out in a lot of situations in which they ended the year third overall in points. They had a pretty good season, 179 points according to ESPN, and they helped me out for multiple weeks in fantasy football. Even though despite them giving up a lot of yardage on both ways, passing defense as well as rushing defense, and they're going to look ways to improve at that. Now during this offseason, they lost a good offensive lineman and Brandon Albert, so they're looking forward to have a good offensive lineman to replace him, to still continue working well and running the football, as well as doing a better job passing the football. So they could be looking at an O-lineman with their first pick. They could also use a wide receiver. Like I said, Jamal Charles did lead the team in receiving, and they're going to have a receiver leading the way. Hopefully Dwayne Bowe will get back into shape. Now also they could use a good tight end on the offensive side. Anthony Fasano's actually entering his 9th season, so they're looking for a good playmaking, pass-catching tight end like Tony Gonzalez was years ago for the Kansas City Chiefs. He had a stellar career as a Chief. Now on the defensive side, there's a couple of two specific positions they need to really start looking at. A good 3-4 defensive end. Stephen Tua could be still available out of Notre Dame. I think he can still help out that defensive line and stop the rush defense, who was actually 22nd in the league in rushing yards allowed, while 25th in the league in passing yards allowed. So I mentioned the defensive end, and I think they need to address the secondary as well. They could address the secondary with this pick with a good cornerback opposite of Pro Bowler Brandon Flowers, and I think those are two key positions defensively that they can use help with. But they still have Tamba Ali and Justin Houston, 10+ sacks last season, and let's not forget about Pro Bowler Derek Johnson, who was Pro Bowl MVP last season, co-MVP last season. Now for this particular pick, I think they're going to address the offensive side, even though the defense could still use some help, but they still have some good player makers on the defensive side who can cause turnovers, and that's why they did so well in fantasy play. So I think for their first round pick, they're going to go with a wide receiver, and two players in particular that I've been debating on who they should select for this pick. For me personally, I think it's between Marquise Lee and Brandon Cooks. Marquise Lee out of USC and Brandon Cooks out of Oregon State. Two Pac-12 receivers, and I think that they're two stellar receivers who could help spread off that offense and have a good receiving core to work opposite of Dwayne Bowe. And I think for this particular pick, I'm going to have to go with Marquise Lee out of USC. He had a great career as a Trojan. Now his numbers did go down this past season due to the inconsistency at quarterback, as I mentioned before. But let's not forget, when he did had a good quarterback like Matt Barkley, and he was also teammates with Robert Woods, he was still the better receiver, and he helped out Robert Woods a lot with his numbers overall. He's a great receiver, and I think he could be an excellent complement for Dwayne Bowe. Now this could be the same for Brandon Cooks. He's used more as a slot receiver, a good number 2 receiver opposite of Brandon Bowe. So let's not Dwayne Bowe. So let's not take that out of consideration. But I still think they could go with Marquise Lee for this pick because he's a better receiver. He's a better deep ball threat, and we all seen what he showcased at USC with other good receivers around him. Pretty much showed that he was the better receiver between him and Robert Woods. But let's not Robert Woods. He's with the Buffalo Bills, and he had a pretty decent season last year. So I'm going to have to go with Marquise Lee for this one. But who I think they will select for this one, I think they're going to go with Brandon Cooks out of Oregon State, because I have Marquise Lee gone to the New York Jets, because I think the Jets is going to end up picking him up at pick number 18. So for this pick, I'm going to have to go with Brandon Cooks out of Oregon State of who the team will pick for this one. But who they should pick is Marquise Lee. That is part of that side of the mock draft. Now, the next time I'm going to catch you guys is tomorrow. Going to continue things on with pick number 24, belonging to the Cincinnati Bengals. Thank you for watching today's vlog from Pro Football Exclusive. I'm your man, Akeem McCall. Be easy.